It's by Shredded Nerd. Now, I haven't watched anything by this man before. This is called Millennial Reviewers. And I have an issue. I try to do with my reviews is try to bring back some of the more like crude humor and stuff that I used to watch with the Angry Video Game Nerd and stuff from that time period, while mixing in stuff that's more of flow, kind of like Civvy. I have a lot of inspiration that I pull when I make my videos. Now, I don't consider myself even close to as good as these people. I figure my videos are just kind of my unhinged rants that I have fun with. But I like to put in that humor that I don't see hit the mainstream like it used to. And I have a problem with a lot of these millennial style reviewers. Like, I have reacted in the past, like like why Wolfenstein can't be made today, and it was just such a bad take. It was such a bad take where it's just over like one-sidedly political, and it's made to be like slow spoken and to pretend like it's everything wants to be highly intellectual instead of just having fun with stuff. And I don't like that. I just like having fun with stuff. So I don't know what perspective he's going to go about with this, but I'm very interested to see millennial reviewers.
How cringe-lennials were living through one of the best eras in video games. Classic after classic was releasing every other week, and they were just like, meh. Blow's adventure for the NES was way better. This stuff is soulless garbage. This video is a little different. In the past, I looked at the millennial style. This one is about the generation of reviewers, the past generation who shaped the way games are now. But, Mr. Nerd, not all of these people are millennials. Yes, that's true. Not everyone I'm going to mention in this review technically belongs to the millennial generation. It's really just the easiest way to single out this time period, this past generation. And if you're a millennial, these things all apply to you. You look like this and you say and do all of these things. No exceptions.
Well, maybe I fucked up and I'm in this category. Maybe he's gonna make fun of people like me, I guess. Angry Joe always annoyed the fuck out of me, dude. But I did here's the thing too. When I watch people like Civvy, right, Civvy 11, and I have a lot of respect for Civvy 11. I think he's an incredible YouTuber, but I do hate that he lumps everything from like Halo through Call of Duty as being bad games. When they are fun games, they're just not old school style shooters. It's like, oh, the old games were really good and these are fucking garbage, and that's just such a bad perspective to have. Like, it's like you're just lumping them in because you don't like this generation. Because why? You're fucking angry that everything's not Doom.
So, millennial reviewers, do they affect video games? Well, yes. Of course, the main influence on gaming is revenue. That will always be the main motivation. It is the lifeblood that keeps the industry running. Just like how the food industry is driven by money, or the mining industry is motivated by money. But money is not the sole decision-making factor in the creation of games. And the deeper you go into the nitty-gritty of game design, you can see what developers say when making game design decisions. They look at what is popular, at commercial success. They look at what game testers say. They look at public opinion. And they look at critical opinion. Critical success is a factor in game design decisions.
Dude, this is so wild. Okay, we're gonna go frame back. Hold
popular.
on.
At commercial success, they look at what game testers say. They look at public opinion. And they look at critical opinion.
Right here, dude. They are looking high comprehensive. It's comprehensive thinking. God damn it! It's like cinnamon right now. I can't fucking say the word. High comprehension of themes. A self-motivation to source more scenarios. One of the design choices why God of War Ragnarok was so fucking linear, to the point that everything feels like it's constantly nagging you and telling you what to do. And if you try to go off the beaten path in God of War Ragnarok and go looking for chests or whatever, you will have all the side characters constantly like, what is he doing? He likes to open boxes. Why is he doing this? Because he likes to open boxes. Shouldn't we get back to the process at hand? Yeah, we should, but he likes to open boxes. And you're like, shut the fuck up, dude. Just let me enjoy the game. It's all because DSP was bad at God of War 2018. That is Dark Side Phil right there. Captain, oh, is the camera still on? Dude, the reason all the characters nag at you is because Dark Side Phil is too retarded to get through a game.
Critical success is a factor in game design decisions. So, with that in mind, how have critical opinions affected the current generation of video games? Well, let's take a look. If you're a gamer, especially one from one of those expensive countries, you probably feel screwed over with the price of games being what they are. The price of anything online, really. But there is another way. That's why I'm sponsored by Surfshark for this video. It's a subscription
what a fucking good ad. If you want his Surfshark thing, go down in his description or whatever.
So click on my affiliate link below. Visit surfshark.com/shreddednerd to get 4 extra months for free. And make sure you have the correct referral so that Diddy doesn't try to skim some money off the top. And download Surfshark today. It has a 30-day money-back guarantee.
That's a weird thing where so Diddy doesn't try to skim money off the top when you're getting a pushback from this. Like you're getting a little money off the top. Not saying you're Diddy or anything, just a weird joke to put in there when your affiliate link is what's paying you.
And subscribe, it glows. Does the like button also glow? So, to the examples. Remember how
by the way, he said subscribe to my channel, guys. Let's get me fucking stonking up to a billion gajillion subscribers. I want to be making dividends. I want to get one of those supreme dollar bill shooting guns. I want to be laughing at you because I'll be like, I'm the ultimate capitalist gamer. You guys are all silly and poor. Let's get me to that level. Or dislike the video. That would be cool. Yeah, dislike it for me being a capitalist gooner or whatever, and hate comment. It'll push me in the algorithm.
Often reviews would include some criticism along the lines of, this game was only 6 hours, it was only 8 hours.
The single player campaign is criminally short, maybe 8 to 10 hours depending on difficulty setting and individual ham-handedness.
The criticism was essentially that the game wasn't long enough. It didn't take enough of your time. Now, it's not like there's no value to this critique. Games do make a value proposition. Considering the amount of hours of enjoyment you get for your $60 purchase isn't...
And this is the problem. He's going to go into the value proposition because games are expensive. Inflation's gone up. Everything's expensive. So when you're looking at getting an entertainment product such as this, you're going to make harder choices like, do I buy the 4-hour campaign that looks pretty fun, or do I buy the 40-hour campaign where I'm going to be in the game a much longer time and pay the same amount of money? I totally understand this proposition, but also you can also take the other perspective and say, wow, dude, look at Turbo Overkill, which I think Turbo Overkill at full price is like $40. Turbo Overkill. How much is it on Steam? We'll go Steam because I think it's similar on console. What? Let's go here. We're gonna go Turbo Overkill. $20. Turbo Overkill is $20 and the game's fucking peak. There's a lot of indie games that are fighting for your money at a much more reasonable cost all the time, and it's funny that the AAA industry just keeps hiking up the money and giving you bloated Ubisoft bullshit when there are indie games constantly fighting for your money. Like, take for example DOSman Games. DOSman Games make 1 to 3 hour games, right? And they publish, usually their games are released at around $3, I think, maybe sometimes $4, but usually like $3. Yeah, they're not very long, but they're incredibly fun. But there's a better value proposition. I think that that's the better way to do it. Instead of making every game an over-bloated, annoyingly long experience, you could have games that are shorter but have a better value proposition. And I don't think the AAA industry understands that yet. I think that they need to figure it out. I would like to see them, like studios that are big and have massive amounts of money, maybe do a bunch of AA style games and hit them at the $40 mark. And then I'd be more willing to be like, oh, it's like a 10-hour game, but it's only $40. Yeah, dude, I'm gonna be pulling that trigger.
Without merit, or more like $70 nowadays, probably $100 in the future. If you pay full price for a 3-hour game with no replayability, you might feel ripped off. But quality and quantity are obviously not identical. In the time since such criticism was widespread, what has happened? Well, Assassin's Creed happened, World of Warcraft happened, or continued to happen, Gacha happened, and we realize you can dominate all of your players' time with mindless, repetitive busywork. Collect 1,000 feathers. collect 200 Funko Pops, and games would often pad out their runtime with boring filler missions that break the pacing. One of the most egregious examples, and one of my favorites, was there's these two missions right near the end of Borderlands 2 that you basically forget and basically just exist to pad out the runtime for the game right near the end, and they just break the pacing entirely. We had a massive wave of generic open world games that always slow you down with the most mind-numbing activities. Some games have even come to consist largely of...
And I think when these games first came out, like Borderlands, Borderlands 2, and the early Assassin's Creed games, there was a lot of repetitive stuff, but the idea that was great about them, and even like Grand Theft Auto sits in this, is the idea that you had this open world to do, like, you had all this fun that could be had. There was no more limitations of you just running down the hallway killing stuff. You finally had a world to mess with. It was kind of taking the ideas that RPGs have been running with for a very, very long time, where you're like, you're telling me I can go on the trees, you're telling me I can jerk off on this guy, I can shoot this guy in the head, I have all this freedom, and I can spend like hours and hours and hours just exploring this world, and there's nothing telling me I need to get to the next quest marker. And it was just wonderful. It was something that nobody had seen before. Well, more games started doing that more and more, and they felt like gamers wanted to get more value for their bucks, so they started making everything open world, and everything was it was just like it was oversaturation is what happened. But I don't think we should take away from the early games like Borderlands and stuff, because when they came out, they were fucking awesome. Everybody liked them because of the fact that it was like, look how much freedom I get in this. Look how cool this is. And that sheen of it being open world is gone. It's left because we've done it a million fucking times. Ubisoft drops a fucking Far Cry game and an Assassin's Creed game like every year to every other year. Borderlands has oversaturated the market. I mean, I actually think the best Borderlands game that I played in a while was Tiny Tina's, and it had more of a linear style to it. And I know a lot of people hate Tiny Tina's Wonderland, but I really enjoyed what it gave me. It was like, go to hub, kill things, go to next hub. And I like the idea. I still think they bloated the whole concept of Tiny Tina's. I think it should have been streamlined, but the core idea there I thought would have been a cool idea.
The busy work, with very little actual substantial gameplay in between, like Destiny. In retrospect, those games that were basically 8 hours of all killer, no filler were a miracle. There are some shorter indie games out there that show us that games don't have to be so long. They just have to be good, be compelling. While it isn't just critics that cause this phenomenon, I don't think it's a stretch to say that this constant complaining about it contributed to developers trying to pad out their games. Another obvious one, to me, when talking of the snark-lennial generation, is the Disney adults of gaming, and that is the Nintendo adults. There was an entire Nintendo
Oh, dude, we got a Harmon Smith reference. That dude sucks. What a fucking cringe lord. Nintendo adults are annoying as fuck, bro. The Nintendo gooners. I like my Nintendo Switch. I do. I like the idea that I can play my games in handheld form. I actually have Turbo Overkill for the Switch, so I can play it on my PC, much better on my PC. Or I can go play a worse version of it on my Switch, but I still get to play it at my leisure. I like that. It's the same reason why I have a Backbone controller to play Game Pass on my phone. I like having that freedom. I can watch some fucking TV and enjoy my free time and play a game at the same time. I'm terrible at multitasking, but I give it my darndest, bro. I give it my darndest. But if I try to add in a jerk-off session while at the same time, can't do it. Can't do it. I can't focus hard enough.
Industrial complex on YouTube back in the day, hyping up Nintendo products endlessly. Imagine this, a guy who just makes top 10 videos all day, all night, where there's a massive intro between every entry on the list, where he edits in a couple game cutscenes or whatever. In the early days of gaming YouTube, these people were the dominant voices, and they were the voices for all of gaming. They really started review culture on YouTube. They made an art form out of it, and frankly, some of them were quite good at it. It was downstream from the previous Nintendo review culture. That is, a lot of game journalists and people who write about games were huge Nintendo evangelists, like the Mormons of gaming. One example is Banjo-Kazooie. Now, it's a fun game. It's a good game, but if you listen to YouTube reviewers for long enough, you would think it was the second 3D platform.
On top of this, dude, you want to see something egregious where people will take and they will complain about Conquer Reloaded all the time. They talk about how Conquer Reloaded is the worst version of Conquer. And it's like, dude, Conquer Reloaded plays so much better than the original Conquer. Like, the original Conquer has the problems where everything's inverted, it's hard to control, it's kind of annoying. I understand that it's still a good game, but I can play the better, like, cleaner version. And yeah, some of the jokes are when they say the word, they'll censor it in the little like running subtitles, but they'll still say the cuss words. It's like the weird censorship they talk about in Conquer Reloaded. It's just such a weird dynamic. They're like, oh well, once Xbox got Rare, they were downhill, and like some of that is true, kind of. I mean, Sea of Thieves definitely has been an incredibly successful game, so I don't know if that's 100% true. I would like to see Conquer come back because that game's fucking amazing. I have a video of it on my channel. I love Conquer Reloaded. It is one of my favorite games I've ever played. It's just like, dude, and the Nintendo guys too, I like that they'll make excuses why Nintendo is okay to sell their games for $70 when on the other end, if PlayStation or Xbox does it right, they have to have the best graphics. It has to run at 60 frames. It has to hit all these marks, and Nintendo will just hit you with slop, and they'll say, yeah, it runs at 30 frames sometimes, and yeah, dude, the graphics kind of suck. It's the fidelity's not great, but you are a Nintendo fucking cum guzzler, and you better suck it up, because we're going to charge you more money now. And it's also annoying how Nintendo, their games hold value more than other games, and it's like, dude, fucking why? Why? It's because of this false inflation of people just holding on to shit.
A game ever made, after Super Mario 64, of course. Banjo was well made, but it was also doing things other games are doing or had done. Nintendo is kind of like a bubble, a closed ecosystem, an echo chamber. When you're within it, you have a skewed vision of the gaming landscape, and tend to view Nintendo products as bigger cultural phenomenons than they really were. There is an infamous exceit. Nintendo YouTubers would make you think that Banjo-Kazooie was a massive phenomenon, but in reality it sold about as much as Croc. It is said that the Banjo Cuck kneels before the Croc Chad. GoldenEye 64...
It's so crazy because of the idea that I've never heard of Croc, but I hear people insufferably talk about Banjo-Kazooie all of the time. And it's like, yeah, Banjo-Kazooie is a fun game, but like you play any 3D platformer in and around that time, it's very similar to those. I can go and play Crash Bandicoot, or I can jump back and play what's that? Sly Cooper, dude. Sly Cooper's one of the best to ever do it. Psychonauts. And I know those are a later generation, but come on, dude, those games are fucking peak, dog. And you think that I'm not like, just because they didn't release on Nintendo, you're gonna tell me Psychonauts is not fucking peak? I mean, I don't know if Psychonauts released on Nintendo or whatever, but I do know that it's fucking peak. Everyone should play Psychonauts. Also, GoldenEye is kind of mid.
Or is a similar case. It didn't really achieve things that other games of the time didn't have. Non-linear objective systems? Other games did that too. Quake 2 came out around the same time. In fact, other first-person games had much deeper systems well before it came out. Not to mention that it doesn't hold up as much as other shooters from the time. Mostly due to
I have said this so many times about GoldenEye 007. Even games that came out like Turok do the gameplay loop way better than GoldenEye. GoldenEye was so popular, one, because it was on a console and people were playing with their friends, and that's what they remember as in their childhood. There's a lot of nostalgia around it. Other reason is it had an IP like James Bond behind it. But you look at the games coming out on PC, they were leagues and miles ahead of this game in terms of being revolutionary. Like, I can sit here and understand the argument why people will say that Halo was revolutionary, right? And I can look and say, yeah, there was other stuff in the market that were doing, like, had faster paced combat, had a little better, some better systems than Halo. But I thought that Halo did something by combining two of the FPS genres that were getting big. The kind of more slow-paced war games like Medal of Honor, and it took the arena games like Quake and kind of combined them into its weird slower flow to make it really popular on console. And I think it was honestly really revolutionary in that idea to get the casual gamer to love FPS multiplayer games, which then led to Call of Duty. That's why it was such an impact. But when I look at GoldenEye, I just see it as there was other shit going on at the same time that was doing the same thing, and you go back and try to play this game, it plays so fucking bad.
The control scheme, which was one of the obvious downsides of the system. The fucked up controller that they forced developers and gamers to deal with. It sucks. There's no "it had soul." No, it was just nonsensical and shit. You can meme it all you want, but there will never be some ironic reassessment of this. It was silly. And it was a silly restriction that every developer who worked on the system had to work around. These man-children would also make a bold claim often. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time is the best game of all time. And it's still upheld at this level by a lot of critics. Now, of course, any product that's held to this level before you go into it as a consumer is probably not going to live up to that title. It probably won't meet that expectation. And I went into Zelda aware of the cultural influence it held. All these Nintendo YouTubers held it up as the holy grail. And yeah, it's definitely not the greatest game of all time. Also, that is just my opinion. But like all the others, it is still very good. It's still very well made, and this game was certainly influential on adventure games. The lock-on, the auto-jump, the simple intuitive puzzle designs, all the dungeons are so varied. You fight all these creatures that look like they crawled out of Asmongold's room. But as for it being like the greatest ever, I actually just don't get it. Maybe you had to be there. You had to be a child growing up with this. But it still doesn't make sense to me. Maybe because it's so simple and intuitive, so polished for the time. Similar appeal to, say, Portal. It's kind of why Paradox...
I do think that he's kind of underselling Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time a little bit. I mean, anything else didn't give you this freedom. It was just... I mean, there was probably something on PC you could draw a comparison to, like what the Elder Scrolls series is doing or something like Daggerfall or whatever. But I do think that there was something magical about this game. Now, I played it on the GameCube and I didn't get that far into it. I actually was more of a Wind Waker guy. But I could understand the appeal, and I remember just loving the world, and it's just a really well-made game, and it's a good adventure game. And I don't think I think in where we are now is where we've lost the brilliance of adventure games and gone toward almost like open world RPGs. And I like the way that this almost felt open world but wasn't. It was that hub of design that I think was really cool of games like Outer Worlds did this, and I really liked the more hub design of it. And I think going back to something like that and bringing out more adventure games like this would be a benefit.
Games or Factorio could never be hailed as the greatest games of all time, even though they are the greatest for some people. Having too much complexity automatically filters out enough of the audience. Action RPGs and adventure games were able to effectively hint at some of the depth that exists in RPGs without overloading the normie brain with too much information. Perhaps that's why Skyrim is also so popular. So I would say the Nintendo bonus when it comes to reviews is absolutely real. And converse to the Nintendo 64 praise was the GameCube hate. Both the GameCube and the Nintendo...
The GameCube was fucking fire, dude. The GameCube was fire. I don't care what anybody says.
64 undersold. The GameCube had obviously a much better controller, which to be fair isn't hard. It also had a good library of exclusives. Maybe it was a bit disappointing as a follow-up, maybe it wasn't as good as its competition, but it will forever be known as the Nintendo Shitcube. Well, at least every GameCube that got sold actually got played. Every single family on planet Earth bought a Wii, and that Wii is now left to collect dust on the drawer.
Bro, exactly, dude. I have a Wii and it's never been plugged into my TV. We bought it at a Goodwill for like $10. It works. I don't think I've bought in a single game for it. We got it as like a novelty because I had one as a kid. My wife had one as a kid. She wanted one. I bought it and we've never plugged it in. We have a Switch. Why the fuck would we turn that Wii on? And I also hate that Nintendo refuses to port their old games. It's a problem I would constantly harp on for PlayStation 2. I think the only one in the console market who does successfully port their old games is Xbox, which should be an insult to the other two.
Was under the TV. And it's interesting how the GameCube was singled out as the console for kids, as if the Nintendo 64 and the Wii weren't for little children. Like, just look at this thing. This is the most a game console has ever looked like a toy. Jak 2 is an interesting touchstone for critics. The previous game was a solid platformer, with a very child-friendly atmosphere, like Diddy's Mansion. The sequel was a complete tonal departure.
Dude, Jak 2 is so much better than Jak and Daxter. I didn't like Jak and Daxter that much, but I played through most of Jak 2, and I fucking love Jak 2. I've never played Jak 3 though.
Dark, edgy sci-fi. They made the formerly silent protagonist vocal, and they gave him the vocals of a Linkin Park album. And many critics panned it. A few praised it. Some were indifferent. It was a strange choice indeed, but to be honest, it wasn't that crazy. It honestly worked. It was inspired by other games of the time, the Volga Wave and Limp Bizkit. Other games like Need for Speed did a similar thing.
Dude, Need for Speed Most Wanted. This game was... I had this on the GameCube. I fucking had this on the GameCube, and I love this game so much, dude. I played the shit out of Need for Speed Most Wanted. This is one of the reasons why I don't play racing games anymore. One, I like the more arcadey style of racing games. Two, there's just no series that do this anymore. Everything's overblown and washed out, but there was just something special about Need for Speed Most Wanted when it came out. This was such a special game to me, dude. There was nothing more exciting than getting to the end of the mission and picking you had 3 cards to pick, and one of them had that pink slip where you could get their card, and there was just something because you got to pick 2, and you would pray and you would hope that you would get that fucking pink slip so you could drive whatever cool car they had. God, I fucking loved this game. I worked so hard to blast through that blacklist. This was the game I played the most on the GameCube. I know a lot of people are like, well, you could have played it on your Xbox. I had an Xbox at the same time. I don't know. I got it for in a sale bin for the GameCube, and I loved the shit out of this game.
Games that was inspired by include things like Grand Theft Auto. The previous Jak and Daxter had this kind of interconnected map structure, a bit like Banjo-Kazooie or something. It was actually kind of innovative. No loading screens to interrupt your movement, but then Jak 2 pivoted to an open world style. And to be honest, it is remembered fondly, and for good reason. It actually was a fantastic game, honestly. And no, it wasn't too edgy. This is one of those rare cases where developers correctly read the room and pivoted away from bright Scrimblow-Bimblow likes into a new direction. And
because the problem with Jak and Daxter 1, and I think he said it with Banjo-Kazooie, but the Naughty Dog had just finished their work on Crash Bandicoot, and in Crash Bandicoot they were working in adjacent with Activision at the time, and so this was going to be their self-produced game that was going to be theirs, and this was before they were bought by PlayStation, and they had made Jak and Daxter, right? But the problem with Jak and Daxter was it didn't feel much different than Banjo-Kazooie. It felt way too similar. It was just Banjo-Kazooie with new characters, and so with Jak 2, they went in an absolutely different direction, and I think it's way better because it doesn't feel like a ripoff of another game like Jak and Daxter did.
Pulled it off. The writing was witty and the characters were good. The plot was engaging, and to be honest, it still had plenty of light-hearted moments. It actually worked quite well, having characters like Daxter juxtaposed with the grim environments. Goofy characters in a goofy world are just kind of wasted, they don't really stand out. This new direction added more contrast, and it added some more depth even. Another big criticism that the game received was for the abundance of timed missions. You often had to redo missions several times due to...
I will say this is really fucking annoying in Jak 2. Like, you'll be doing something instead of just being able to have fun, it's just always timed, and you especially when you're playing it in the modern day where some of the stuff can be a little janky. It gets kind of annoying. It was one of the reasons why I didn't finish the game, so I would agree with this.
The strict time limitation, and you had to redo them over and over, and it was challenging. Like, you'd have to escort somebody to a location within like 2 minutes. Many of them made use of these hover bikes that you could find everywhere that people were driving around, and you know, this game was known for its difficulty, which is funny because I beat it as a kid and I just thought, this is normal.
It's not wildly difficult, it's just more of a nuisance, I would say. I don't think it's like making the game really hard. I just found it like some of the controls can be a little wonky for the modern era, because I played this in the modern era. I played this on my PS5. So I can see my problem with this was always the jankiness of it gets in the way of the fun, especially when you're on the timed shit and you do something slightly off because it's a little wonky.
It was only after growing up that I found out it was meant to be a very difficult game, apparently. And that's not to gas myself up as some kind of pro, I just like to be challenged. And I didn't mind repeating the same mission when I failed. That just means I wasn't good enough. In my eyes, that was just about as hard as a game should be. But I learned much later that people hated the timed missions. I thought they were great. It adds an extra intensity to games. It sets a skill floor to be able to beat the games and really tested your abilities. It didn't feel cheap to me. The plot had a reason for them to exist. They were often communicated in advance, and the times were never that long. You had to make it somewhere within 2 minutes, which really isn't that long. Like, you can repeat that, it's fine. You can't just dilly-dally around. You need to be focused and engaged. And this is a generalized issue as well. Dead Rising was built around this mechanic where there is a clock constantly ticking down, and each side quest...
I don't like the Dead Rising games. I don't like the Dead Rising games that much at all. I don't like that it resets the game over and over again. I found when there's... I don't like roguelikes, right? I don't like roguelikes. I don't like anything that has that I'm starting it... the day over type shit. I find it so annoying. I don't know why. It's just been something that always irks me, so I avoid games like this.
Had time limits attached to it. It added pressure to the game and again pushed you to engage with it because you had to be efficient. You had to make choices all the time, which is engaging. Because with each choice you spend...
And I can understand why it's engaging for some people. I just don't like it. If that's... It's not that I don't understand why it's a thing. I don't understand why people like it. Me personally, when I'm playing a game, I do not want to start the whole game over. And I understand that, like, with roguelikes, and I haven't played much of Dead Rising. I played a little bit of Dead Rising 2, and just starting the game over from day one, I was like, oh, dude, I don't fucking like this. What? I couldn't find the medication, so I have to start the whole day over and do this shit over. It's why I didn't like Majora's Mask. It's why I will never like Majora's Mask. Is I don't like the idea of starting the day over. I think it's fucking irritating. Oh, I didn't play the flute in the right amount of time. Well, I gotta start the whole game over. No, go fuck yourself, dude. I hate that. I hate that. And I get that you can take some of your upgrades and they'll move over or whatever. I don't care, dude. I don't care. It's so insufferable. I hate it. And I can understand why it appeals to some people, but it will never appeal to me. And like roguelites are, there's so many of them now. There's so many of them because people like this shit. And I understand that the reasoning behind it, I just will never get behind it.
Your limited amount of time that you have. I'm honestly shocked more games haven't played around with this feature because it created a really intense and rewarding gameplay loop. There are other games that have a system like this, just hidden behind abstraction, like XCOM, where time is always moving forward and the crises just keep getting worse with time, and you have to manage them and you have to choose which missions to...
Another series, I don't like real-time tactics games. I don't like strategy games. I just find it's the same thing. I don't like turn-based games. I think this is something that people need to be honest about. I see this a lot with reviewers where they will like glaze a game because everybody else is talking nicely about that game, or they will hate a game that everybody else is supposed to hate. And they don't ever really draw lines in the sand. Like, I don't like this style of game. It's not for me. It will never be for me. And it's like, well, you should like it because it's popular. No, I don't have to like it. I don't give a fuck how many copies of Baldur's Gate sold. I'm not going to play it because I already don't like turn-based combat. So why would I spend money on a game and force myself to play a game with a ton of turn-based combat because the general zeitgeist says it's a game I have to play? I don't think anybody should be put in that situation. And I hate that there's like reviews and stuff that make it seem like you have to play this. You have to like it. You don't have to. People have differing opinions. That's okay. It's okay to have differing opinions. It's okay for that some series are not for you. And I think that's absolutely fine. I think that's something we got to be honest about. It's one of the reasons why I'll either talk about how I play something on a lower difficulty or and how it's okay to play stuff on lower difficulty and shit, because I hate this idea that you have to play games on the hardest difficulty or you're not a real gamer. Dude, people have fucking lives. People have shit to do. People are sucking and fucking all the time, and then they're like, oh, dude, I'm so tired. I'm so sweaty. I'm covered in semen. I just want to play a little bit of a game. I don't want to stress out. There you go, dude. I'm not going to say that everybody needs to play a Souls game and love them, because, like, I can understand why you just don't see the time value in it. Like, I get it, dude.
You because you can't do all of them. Time is a resource, and it's basically just like any other resource management in a game. Pushes you to make decisions. See, adding this other level of decision making makes the game more engaging, but critics hated it because they have to think too much. Apparently it's a massive faux pas. With Dead Rising, they actually responded to the noise and removed the time limitation altogether in one of the sequels, and it just ruined the game. Time limits. That's something you don't see as much anymore. Half-Life is another big one for critics. Many claimed Half-Life 2 was the greatest game of all time.
I have a video coming out eventually, or maybe it already came out, depending on when I decide to put this video in the fucking onslaught that is my release schedule. It either already has came out or hasn't came out yet. I made a review on Half-Life, and I am not very positive about the game. I think it has not aged well at all. It has like a lot of wonkiness. I actually cut the video down shorter where I don't go into the themes as much as I should. I don't highlight the great moments of the story as much as I should, because I think I'm going to do that with the remake. Black Mesa, hopefully I enjoy that better, but I really didn't fucking vibe with Half-Life. It just was such an insufferable, cheap game at times. It's almost malicious at times how annoying it is. It's like, oh, you get into the tube, the guy tosses a grenade in, there's really no way out, you're supposed to die right there, because, oh, it got you. There's a lot of cheap bullshit in the game, the guns aren't very great. The cool thing about it is everything transitions into the next area, a lot like what Jack and Daxter did, where everything transitions seamlessly. It feels like you're in this cohesive story, and that it does incredible. And I will give it like fucking snaps or claps or jerk offs for that. But the game aged like fucking sour milk.
With all the other examples, it's a good game, but it was gassed up to mythological status by...
Okay, it didn't age like sour milk. I'm sorry I said that. It aged fine. It just isn't that fun when I can play something like Sin, or I can play Soldier of Fortune, Quake 2. There's so many other options fighting for your time, and I just see Half-Life as a bit of a step down compared to a lot of these other games that are way more fun in terms of still holding up and their guns feeling better and everything else. I just see, like, if you're looking at the store and your wallet is like, ooh, you should pay. There's all these games that you can get. Which one should you get? Ooh, and you look at this and it's just like, I don't see the money equivalents. Now, I think I got this one. I think Valve was giving it out for free. If you get it for free or something, when Valve's like just literally trying to give you Half-Life, like a Half-Life bundle for $8 when it drops down to that. I've seen that a couple times where they drop it down to fucking pennies on the taint. Get it then, play through it. It's worth a playthrough, but I still think that it's not the greatest.
Millennial reviewers. Half-Life has some of the most pretentious fans of all time. They hype it up as though it was some sophisticated masterpiece. Shooters, but for intelligent people. To be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand Half-Life. Without a solid grasp on theoretical physics, the game will just go over your head. Oh, and it never breaks first-person perspective. But you know what it does? It makes a great argument for doing so by forcing you into these unskippable, basically cutscenes, where you just jump around the room and not do anything. Maybe the first time you're listening to the story, but what if you want to replay the game? Suddenly you're forced to go through like an hour's worth of cutscenes before you can even play it. What about these monster closets with enemies that waddle out of it one by one in a row? It's just so damn intellectual, like it's so sophisticated.
I don't know, Half-Life 2 looks fucking fire. I haven't played Half-Life 2 yet, and I think I played a little, okay, so I played a little bit of Half-Life 2 on the Xbox, and I really, really liked Half-Life 2. So I'm hoping Half-Life 2 is as good as I remember it being. But I remember it being way more fluid than Half-Life 1. I had a lot of problems with Half-Life 1.
Sophisticated. I don't think I'm smart enough to get this. I'm just a console pleb. Apparently the enemy AI actually was quite intelligent and well designed, but you couldn't tell with how the levels were designed. Unsatisfying levels, pretty basic puzzles, poor vehicle physics. Like with Ocarina of Time.
Dude, the puzzles in Half-Life 1 are so fucking annoying. It's like, go down a bunch of hallways, hit switch. Go back to main area, go around main area, go to other hallway, run down hallway, hit a switch. Go back to main hallway, run down third hallway, hit third switch. Then kill giant monster because you have to lead them into trap every single fucking time. Half-Life 1 doesn't have any good boss fights. It doesn't have any fun puzzles. Everything is just tedious. It is constantly tedious.
Does a lot of things which are individually done better by other games. There were good shooters before, at the same time, and after the release of Half-Life. Singling Half-Life out specifically as the model, as the only way shooters should be, is very much indicative of a generation of gamers. Accompanying that view is often the idea that Halo ruined shooters, and I've already talked about this. It dumbed them down by making them work for consoles. Not to pit them against each other, I've already done that, but it really isn't that deep. Both Halo 2 and Half-Life 2 were technologically complex for their time. I mean, they both used the Havoc engine for physics. Both of them had sophisticated enemy design with a number of different enemy types with varied behavior depending on so many different environmental factors. Both of them had varied encounters, level design, and visuals. They both had large and varied weapon arsenals. They were both sophisticated in terms of what mattered, the gameplay. It's only the surface level distinctions that people use to say that Halo was unsophisticated. Regenerating health, 2-weapon limit. It was made for console base.
Here's the thing though. I see when I was playing Half-Life 1, I saw a lot of overlap with Halo Combat Evolved and Half-Life 1. And Halo Combat Evolved is a more fun game to play, but Half-Life did come out earlier. So, like, I could see that there possibly was an influence. I mean, Halo 1 came out in 2001, I think. Halo Combat Evolved, let's see here, 2001, and Half-Life came out in, let's see when Half-Life came out, 1998. So it'd be fair to say that during the development of Halo 2 that they might have played Half-Life 1, but they also might not have during that 2-year period while they were working on the game. So I mean, I don't know how long they were working on the game. I feel like there was probably a lot of influence from Half-Life, but I feel like Halo streamlined what Half-Life did into it was a slower combat like Half-Life, with all the PC guys like to shit on the slower combat of Halo 2, but it's very similar to the combat in Half-Life. I think Halo just made it more fun. Halo was a faster version of Half-Life, and I actually like the world building a little bit more in Halo. I think the diverse biomes is better in Halo. Half-Life had like the shittiest end area ever. I mean, there is a lot of things where I can look at Halo and say that it is a much more fun game to play than Half-Life 1. And I haven't played Half-Life 2 though, so I don't know. But Halo 2 is fucking peak. It's one of the best games ever made, and I don't give a shit what anybody says.
I think it definitely was a platform thing. Now that Halo is on PC, nobody seems to care anymore. That superiority complex also extended to Valve as a company. They released a lot of good games, but there was a pervasive idea that they could do no wrong at all. And honestly, this idea persists. Except they popularized loot boxes in PC gaming. They facilitated a gambling economy surrounding their games. Artifact. They're generally not as scummy as other companies, but they've made
Fuck this whole section of Half-Life, by the way. Everything kills you just randomly and sporadically. The first time you go through it, you are going to die because you're going to miss a tripwire or something. It is meant to kill you. Like, there's so much bullshit in the area. Like, you're getting shot by machine guns, you're trying to get around, you're using boxes, you finally get around the area. If you forget to hit this fucking fire exit, then you're rushing yourself. The best thing to do is shoot the fire exit and then run through the door as it closes, and then jump over the trip mines, or toss a grenade in this hallway and destroy the trip mines. But the first time you go around, you don't know the trip mines are there, you blow up. There's a lot of shit where Half-Life, it feels like it's just trying to kill you, so you have to redo it again. So you're constantly learning the thing, and I get that that's intelligent or whatever, but at the same time, it gets really tedious because Half-Life does it all the fucking time.
Ton of anti-consumer decisions over the years. I think one of the biggest effects of Half-Life criticisms is on the topic of first-person platforming. It was held as a maxim that first-person platforming doesn't work. There's one example that it doesn't.
And this is fucking worst first-person platforming of all time. It is so bad.
And many showing that it certainly can. It's not that first-person platforming doesn't work. It's that Half-Life's platforming was bad. Mirror's Edge showed that a first-person platforming game can work, but barely anyone makes these. Until indies came along decades later and showed that you're still allowed
Dude, fucking Ghostwire or it has good platforming, but I hate that you die with one shot. That game gets kind of tedious. But Neon White, even though that game's story is super fucking cringe with its anime bullshit, Neon White's platforming is so fucking good, dude. So fucking good.
To make them, but for a while, devs were afraid to include platforming in their shooter games in any significant capacity. And you see some examples, like there's a secret mission that was...
Oh, dude, Shadow Warrior 3's platforming is so fucking good. Doom Eternals can be a little wonky at times. I mean, I didn't love Doom Eternals platforming. I think it had a little bit of issues, but I think Shadow Warrior 3 took everything that Doom Eternal did and did it better.
Destiny 2 called 0 Hour. Now, most Destiny content is slop, like I said, but a fraction of it is actually really cool and well designed, and this is one of the cool examples. It was cool because it had both first-person platforming.
I do think that this video is kind of, the millennial reviewer thing is kind of not the greatest. I get where it's like the basis. It's okay for the basis, but I've critiqued videos in the past for having bad titles and not really matching what they were trying to talk about. So to keep a $1.50, this isn't the greatest. I thought this was going to be a critique on why, like trash reviewers or something, and it's not really that. It's just kind of pointing out the hypocrisy in gaming in general, I would say, and kind of shitting on games that are loved. It's more I would have said the problem with overhyped games is the better talking point here. I think that that is the main objective of this.
And a strict time limit, and that made it so fun and intense. But you can barely make things like this because reviewers don't like actual challenge. Also, they removed this mission from the game anyway. Now it's just sitting there in the vault with all of P. Diddy's unreleased music. Another common criticism you'd hear in the millennial generation was that games were too linear and scripted. I miss when games were just moving around an abstract environment picking up keys. Why do they have stories and events happening? There were some freeform games like Thief and Deus Ex where you could basically approach each scenario in the game any way you wanted. And you know, like some of the others, this criticism isn't entirely without merit. Like, there were some military shooters that would completely railroad you around like 2010. Giving you absolutely no options. But it became a cliche. And here's the thing, many of the most beloved games are also extremely scripted and linear. Half-Life? Max Payne? I think it was about player expectations. If you see a place that looks like you should be able to go there, but you can't, that feels bad for the player. It's also about games not letting the player fail, not letting them fuck up and have to redo sections. The critique wasn't really focused enough, and now every dev wants to do some open world slop, or semi-open world slop. Both of these ideas can be very good and work in a certain context, but you really have to build it as an open world game from the ground up. And for a lot of these games that tried it, it was really more of a flop, because they were trying to mesh together conflicting styles. Like Shadow Warrior 2, it added replayable open world...
Yes, Shadow Warrior 2 was a very good example of just trying everything that was popular at the time. It had the Borderlands gun mechanic, but it didn't really have that good a variety of guns. It had open hub areas that just felt unnecessary. It had the overly spongy enemies where you had a bunch of fucking numbers shooting at you. Shadow Warrior 2 had, like, fun that was there to be had, right? But the game got in the way of its own fun, trying to chase trends.
Light missions with a hub world and a Borderlands light weapon system, and it just ruined the experience. It was way better off as a linear level-based shooter. And I'm glad modern shooters like Doom Eternal really lean into the linear formula, because that's often the best for well-crafted multiplayer experiences. Another common thread: cover shooters bad. Heard in the context of first-person shooters, but also more so with third-person shooters.
I don't love cover shooters. I don't. I played the fucking Gears of War games. I played 1 and 2. 2 is an amazing story. 2 has so much good going for it, but at the end of the day, I still don't, even with me spam hopping around like I'm turning it into a movement shooter, it's still not that fun, you know? I just never have loved it, even with like the what are the games with the fucking Indiana Jones guy? Fuck, dude, I can't remember what those games are called. You have to let me know in the comments. But even those games with Nathan, whatever his name is, I didn't love those either. I just don't like I don't like cover based mechanic shooting. I just never feel like it's fun. It feels tedious. It feels annoying. I don't know. I don't know. I've never loved this gameplay style.
Especially with Gears of War. Like the other critiques, there was a phenomenon that gave rise to this critique. It was a bit saturated, but it was never really that bad. Like, you were never really forced to play them. There was never a point where third-person chest-high wall cover shooters were completely unavoidable. And there were many good games in the genre. Overall, I just feel this trend was mostly avoidable, with a few standout shockers like Kane and Lynch. But here's the thing, every shooter has cover. Just taking aim at the idea of cover altogether.
I think the problem with the cover shooter phenomenon is there was a bit of oversaturation. Like one game I'm thinking of in particular was fuck, I can't think of any games right now, dude. It had like Duke Danger or some stupid ass name like that. Will Arnett was the voice in it. It was one of my first reviews after that I did The Witcher 2 that got really good views. Eat Lead. That was called Eat Lead. And I remember thinking it was a parody game, but it was doing hard cover-based mechanics a lot like Gears of War. Like, it is like shot-for-shot Gears of War, but just not as fun. And the problem is it forces you into cover. You can't ever run and gun. You never feel like you have that opportunity to really cut loose and have fun. You're just constantly slamming into cover and like moving cover to cover to cover. And it just ruins the flow and it gets tedious to me. That's my personal perspective. I can understand why some people really like them. Again, I understand why a lot of people like a lot of games. But preferentially, like, in my preference is if I had the choice between a fucking game like Max Payne or a game like Gears of War, I'm going to take the Max Payne style game every single fucking time. It's just, to me, more fun. It's setting off that monkey brain. Ooh, fucking movement. Blah, 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 blah. I feel like a badass. I feel like John Wick. I feel like I'm in a John Woo movie. When the other one's like, oh, I'm tactical? I don't fucking care, dude. It's slow.
Broadly writing it off, saying a game forces you to take cover is a bad thing. Every shooter is built around cover to some degree. It is a basic element of shooters, and emphasizing it more in some games has produced some of the most unique and interesting gameplay interactions we've seen, like tactical shooters as an entire genre. They're basically cover-based shooters. And with the chest-high walls dotted around the map in third-person shooters, there are a lot of similar game contrivances that you'll notice when you pay attention. To be fair, this specific one is more noticeable. Isn't it great that there aren't as many games like this now? They haven't disappeared.
I don't think that it's great that there isn't. I think that there's a lot of fans of this style, and I think there's a lot of people who didn't like this, and they threw a little hissy fit because they didn't like a game, and so if they think a game's bad, everybody should think a game's bad. And I don't like that mentality. I don't think it's productive. I can look at a game and be like, I don't like this style of game, so I'm just not going to buy it. It's not for me. That's fine. But to go out and say they're all bad, they're all trash, it's just such a regressive way to do it. I mean, it's okay to not like a game, but to say that that game genre shouldn't exist is kind of fucking cringe. And I've probably done this in the past too, where I've shit on stuff. You really hate when a game will be a certain genre and then they'll just fucking go to an absolutely different genre that I don't like. So I've been a fan of this series all the way, like the Blood Rain series. I love Blood Rain 1, I love Blood Rain 2, but the weird spin-off game that they made that was just a fucking platformer, I felt like it was a slap in the face to the games we had previously. And it's also a genre that I don't really like side-scrollers. I do okay. I mean, so far I've said a lot of games that I don't like. It seems like I only like FPS games and like RPGs and adventure games. But at the same time, I look at the Blood Rain series and it's like, why would I play this game that looks like it's a knockoff of Hollow Knight when you had a very original style game that felt different? Like, you play Blood Rain, it feels like a combination of the hack and slash games at the time and also a bit of Max Payne. It feels like a very original style game, even though it's pulling a lot of influences from a lot of different areas. And then you play the whatever that other one is and it's just like another Hollow Knight. Like, sure, it might do a couple things different or whatever, but it's like, why the fuck would I do that when it was famous for a single reason, and you're just taking the IP and slapping it on something else? It's the same problem I have with Prey 2017. It's like, you're nothing like the other Prey. I mean, and people are like, well, they didn't. It's like still, it's in the same series, so I can understand why fans of Prey 2006 did not like Prey 2017 because they're one of their favorite games. Literally had their name slapped on something else, and they feel cheated.
I mean, every third person game still has the obligatory, leaning against the wall mechanic, but it's basically useless in many of them now. They just include it because they have to. I think the gameplay in these cover-based third-person shooters is orders of magnitude better than the generic Grand Theft Auto style. It has, actual combat with actual enemies that have actual strategy, rather than just go here, point at guys, click to shoot them, and that's it. Another thing that these third-person, chest-high wall military-style shooters had was so-called tacked-on multiplayer. It wasn't just those that had this feature either. It would often happen in first-person shooters as well, and even some platformer games. This is basically where developers would create a largely single-player game, but then also include a multiplayer side mode as well, which was clearly intended to be secondary in the experience. There are some bad examples like BioShock 2, it was just kind of unnecessary there. But also, basically every good multiplayer game started out as tacked on multiplayer. Call of Duty, Halo...
And this is a problem that I see a lot. This is something I would love to add on here, because it's like, I hated Halo 5 a lot for its campaign feeling like it was secondary. And there's this idea that people are like, well, we gotta chase the bag, we gotta hit the live service thing. And the problem is they never understood why these games became popular in the first place. It's like they would make a game like Call of Duty that had a really good campaign and then had a really good multiplayer at the same time. They'd make a game like Halo. Halo was a really fun campaign, but it also had a really fun multiplayer you could play with your friends. So it was like a side mode. It was a side attachment, and you would play it, and you're like, holy shit, this is fun. I'm going to get my friends to play this. And then it spreads, and then it starts getting competitive, and then it hits the competitive scene. It was a natural progression. Now they're wanting to remove the natural progression and just say, oh, dude, we got to ask the pros what they want in the game because we want the pro input. It's like, no, fuck them, dude. They're not the people that are selling your game for you. You can make the game the best way you want, make it with all the fun things you want, and then unapologetically put it out. And if enough people get the games, the pro community will play that game. We're doing everything ass backwards right now, dude. It's so fucking cringe.
Rainbow Six, at least the classics. Maybe newer games just aren't like that anymore. Seems there's a lot more multiplayer only games now that people are playing. But in a lot of those classics, they were basically modes that were added at the last minute, using significantly fewer development resources than the campaign. Now, I disagree with this tacked on multiplayer critiques because these multiplayer modes felt the opposite of cynical. They very often felt to me like something the developers pushed to add into their game out of love, because they wanted to provide the best value to the customer. Not to mention, not every...
This is also why I see a lot of people who always hate on Call of Duty, right? And then they're mad when another game comes out and doesn't be able to sell like Call of Duty sells. There's a reason why Call of Duty has outlasted all of these Call of Duty type killers, whether it's Ubisoft with their fucking Defiant game or... I know there's been like a bunch of other Call of Duty titles. I'm not going to figure out the list in my top of my head right now. Medal of Honor died through this. There's a ton of games. The reason Call of Duty has stayed so long and why these games that come out of nowhere and are just the multiplayer aspect of Call of Duty don't wipe Call of Duty off the map isn't just brand recognition. It's also a value a proposition that you're getting from Activision. When you buy Call of Duty, you get a campaign, you usually get multiplayer. There's also usually another weird mode that they decide. There's zombies. There's a ton of stuff you get with the purchase of Call of Duty. Now, I'm not saying every Call of Duty is good, but I understand the value proposition you're getting. Now, is all of it good always? No. Sometimes, like Modern Warfare 3 reboot was trash. I didn't buy it because I heard the campaign was like an hour, and it just kind of fucking slapped shit together to try to get the storyline they had fucked up in the second game steamed out and done. They were like, we're done now. And that kind of sucks. And then some of the games that they released without a campaign, there's a reason if the game would have been super successful, they probably would have stopped releasing Call of Duties without campaign. But what they found out is they sold substantially less than when they had a campaign involved. So they went back to the drawing board and started making campaigns. Even if it was a shitty campaign, they were making sure it had a campaign because of the value proposition.
Part of a game dev team is firing on all cylinders at all times. The design needs to be done before the art. They can't be done synchronously. So if the devs have extra unutilized time, why not try to add something for the fans? Why not create multiplayer maps that reuse campaign assets? Ubisoft used to add cool multiplayer modes like Spies vs Mercs or the Assassin's Creed multiplayer. They were an interesting and fun experience, and who cares if it dies out eventually? Around launch, you get to have a new and interesting experience, and the single player game is still there to play if you buy the game a lot later. And if you really want to try out the multiplayer, you can get some of your friends together to try and run a lobby. And I'm sad this is kind of gone for the most part. I think about how fun Doom 2016 multiplayer was.
Dude, Doom 2016's multiplayer was fire, dude. I fucking love Doom 2016's multiplayer. I remember when I got the game, I was just enveloped with the multiplayer, having a blast, and then the lobbies dried up really fast, and I was like, dude, this kind of sucks. And I was hoping with Doom Eternal they would do another really cool multiplayer, but I hated Doom Eternal's multiplayer. I just wanted that arcadey style combat again, dude. There was something so fun and so fresh about it, and it just felt like something they added in just for the fun factor. And then Doom Eternals felt like it was added in to make money. There was a substantial difference in the two, where it was like, oh, well, we have this multiplayer, you can get cosmetics and check out all this other stuff. And it's like, yeah, I don't care about that, though, dude. I just liked jumping around on boost packs and killing people.
But they never tried to expand on it. They just cut it in Eternal and had battle mode instead. I also can't go without mentioning the obsession reviewers have basically always had with Sonic. Every single video reviewer from a certain era had to mention Sonic 06 in some capacity. It was so overplayed. There was always some gag about how it was pure evil or something, basically just exaggerating it to the level of worst game ever. There are obviously worse games. Some people went as far as to say Sonic was never good. I'm not even a Sonic fan, but obviously there have been good Sonic games. There have also been good 3D Sonic games. Sure, they made plenty of stinkers, but Sonic hate feels very much like something of a certain generation. Now I want to do a rapid fire round, point out some other cliches. One is the dude bro shooter. I went back and looked, and depending on how broad you set your net, it was never really that much of a thing. There weren't that many games around, and many of the archetypical dude bro games were, well...
Awaken to a world
Like,
of wonder.
the dude bro shooter is something that I honestly think that there was this idea of just bros sitting around playing games, and this idea, like, that's the problem with like games like Wolfenstein 2, where they're like, well, we need to talk to the audience, and it's like, bro, your audience isn't going to be the fucking people. Like, I remember, again, I've said this story a million times on stream, when I bought Wolfenstein The New Order, I walked in and I asked what this game was, because I didn't know what Wolfenstein was. He was like, it's just a stupid hoorah America game, and I was like, sold, buying it. Fucking yes, dude. And it was just kind of looked down on. It was anything that was like dude bro shooter was looked down on, and it was fun, dude. And your normal fucking dude is gonna buy a game that you get to fuck shit up in. And then you get into the second one, where you could tell the developers were annoyed with their audience base being just a bunch of bros that like fucking shooting Nazis, and they're like, we need to tell them that they're pieces of shit. So how do we put social messaging into this? And then they flooded it with it because they didn't like that audience base. And it's like, dude, fuck you. That is a big portion of why these games were so successful, because you're fucking everyday bro who comes home after school or comes home after work is going to turn on a game like this. They're not going to turn on a game that's going to fucking lecture them. They just want to have fun and kill shit.
Good. It feels like the precursor to Gamergate and the toxic masculinity discourse more than anything. To some, the dude bro games were basically just any game that featured a bald white male character as the protagonist.
It wasn't just a white male character. It was just a bold fucking character. It was unapologetic. The character was unapologetically badass. It didn't have to be a white character. Like, that is, I hate that that's that talking point, because it's just not true, dude. I mean, how many games that you can think of that just had like cool ass black characters in them? I mean, it's just so it was just a badass character in general. Somebody you could look at and be like, that dude's fucking cool. That guy is fucking awesome. I love this. Like I think of Sin, dude. Sin is one of the coolest. The main character in Sin is one of the coolest fucking guys ever, bro. And it's just about having this badass that you got to play as, and you get a body at, or doing body. It's like why people watch shit like John Wick. It's like, oh, dude, I could be John Wick. It's not about like I hate when the race is thrown in, because I think it misses the point of why there's this thing now. It's all the other shit that weighs down the game with bullshit, where you're just sitting here being lectured and lectured and lectured and lectured instead of just actually getting to do the fun stuff. That's the problem, not the white male fantasy or whatever the fuck we want to talk about. I think the main thing that should be a focus is where we started interjecting political writing where it has no fucking point, and it getting really fucking preachy.
And that was enough to get it labeled dude bro, or just having anything vaguely gritty. Another cliche, Crysis is a tech demo. Crysis 1 was actually quite fun. It had the same freeform gameplay style of Far Cry. It had a variety of vehicles, environments, etc. It felt like it was a fun sandbox game, and it just happened to be pretty on top of that. So I just think calling it a tech demo was just a silly cliche.
I didn't know people called Crysis a tech demo, because Crysis 1 is, I think, the longest of the 3 games. I think Crysis 1 has the longest amount of playtime because it's the most open of the 3 games. The other 2 are more linear. I don't like Crysis 1 because I think it's kind of weak on the story front compared to the other 2. I also just, I don't know, I've never really liked the Far Cry formula of just go here, do thing, go here, do thing, go here, do thing. I find it gets pretty repetitive. The only game that I was really obsessed with in that formula was Blood Dragon, because I love cyberpunk and just neon 80s cyberpunk aesthetics. It's something that's going to sell me most of the time. So that game kind of fucking had me hooked, but Crysis 1 really wasn't my jam. Crysis 2 and 3, though, are some of my favorite games I've ever played.
Okay, what about cell shading hides bad graphics? And this is such a millennial coded position.
That's so fucking stupid. Anybody that says this is fucking actually like a brain rot idiot. Anybody who says cell shading hides bad graphics, you're an idiot. I mean, maybe it does, but it will also make your game last through time better. Like, you look at games that had shell shading back in the 2000s, those games unabashedly hold up better than almost anything else of that time period. Look at Spider-Man 2 for PlayStation 2 or original Xbox or GameCube. I don't know if it came out on GameCube. Compared to Ultimate Spider-Man for those same consoles. Ultimate Spider-Man will look 10 times better because they went with an art design, like an art style, over graphics. You will see shell shading stuff looks better in today's thing because they went for an arts choice instead of just trying to push what graphics could do at that time period. Art design is always better than graphic fidelity any day. I will take an art design choice every single fucking time.
Because nowadays the consensus is, rightly, that art direction trumps graphical fidelity and realism.
Boom! I didn't pre-watch this, but that would be in comics, call that a pre-watch moment. I fucking called it, dude. I called it, dude. I'm so sick of my graphics. I don't give a fuck how much peach fuzz rendering you have if the game is boring and generic. Dude, give me a cool ass art design that I can remember forever.
Day of the week, and cell shading works if that's what the game is going for. I think this cliche comes again from centering the importance of Nintendo and Zelda in the gaming landscape, because so much of it seems to...
You know what? Why Wind Waker is one of the best holding up games in that entire Zelda old catalog? They used an insane pretty art style. This game looks so good in the modern era. Same with like a lot of those older Nintendo games, because of the fact that they fucked with an art style. They didn't go hyper realistic. They could have gone more in a realistic direction for this Zelda. A lot of people were really mad at Wind Waker for going with the making Zelda a kid route, and it's just like, dude, this is the best and prettiest game. And I think that. Comparing this to even the 64, it's not even close. It's not even close how much prettier this is and how this still holds up.
extend from the backlash which Wind Waker received. And I don't even remember hearing about this one back in the day, but I've been told by a few people now that apparently some people thought Fear had weak level design. When I was told about this, I was a bit baffled. I mean, it had great AI, and the objective of level design in this type of game should ultimately be to make the best use of that great AI, to give it interesting interactions. Because Lord knows there's some games that do not make good use of their AI. And Fear level design does make good use of its AI. It gives them interesting interactions, and cool things happen. I will agree that it could be more varied, but obviously they had budget constraints. The level and encounter design and, yes, scripting was excellent for the most part. So what are some of the examples that you remember best? Reviewer cliches, how reviewers affected games? Let me know in the comments. Support me on Patreon, like, subscribe, thanks for watching, goodbye.
That was a really good video. I do understand the cliches. I thought it would go in a different direction and kind of just critique reviewers as a whole and not just take their talking points and critique them. I mean, I wouldn't call this clickbait like some of the other ones I've had where I say that the intro is just completely wrong. I mean, I kind of lead it into that while I was about halfway through, and I think that I am a little wrong on that because he did keep tying it back. But I think it's more talking about the critical critiques and the way it really kind of ramps toward more of the critiques the reviewers had on games later in the video than it did in that midsection. But I think it was a really good video talking kind of about where the industry has gone to now. I think we've made a lot of missteps by listening to the wrong people the industry has. I mean, you can tell that just from the amount of lack of sales that these studios saw pre-COVID, and then after COVID, you were seeing it even more because of the kind of angled writing towards certain causes and certain political talking points. It's just this idea that on Twitter right now this is trending, and this is a window of a small demographic of our buyer base, and our larger demographic, if we just multiply this by the same size, has to be our buyer base, when most people aren't chronically online like the people on Twitter. So it's a bad example to look at. And when you're looking at people who review shit online, most of the time this is a small percentage of the people who are actually buying the games. Most people aren't constantly watching the YouTube videos and listening to every single critique that every reviewer has. So by going to these reviewers and saying, well, what's the correct way to make the game, you might get some that will this is the best direction, this is what we should do, because they're like popular in the genre. But just because they have that portion of base that watches them doesn't mean the majority of people who are going to buy this game and throw their money at the fucking wall for this product are going to be the ones happy. Because when they talk to the pro players or they talk to these pro streamers and stuff, a lot of times the regular average Joe is mad because the game feels angled against them. It doesn't feel like it's fair to them. I remember when I was playing Halo Infinite when it first came out, and the Mangler was so fucking sick. You'd pop, then hit, pop, then hit. And I was like, this is cool. They need to speed up some of the other guns so they feel as good to use as the Mangler. But what did they do? They made the Mangler a harder gun to kill with because the pro players were complaining about it. Instead of just balancing all of the other weapons and making them a little bit faster to kill, so the game had just a slightly faster time to kill for everything, they were like, no, we want everything to be a bit slower, so we're going to do the opposite because the pro players are whining. And when you kowtow to a small portion of the demographic, you're going to lose a bigger portion of the people who are willing to buy your game or play your game, which then ruins the longevity of the game. If you just keep making the general audience happy and keep listening to the general audience consensus, like, maybe have you could literally have a pop-up in the game, like if you were thinking about making this, have the players vote on it, put like a player vote section in the game. There's a million different routes you could go than just listening to pro players and what their thoughts are listening to pretentious reviewers, and then you end up with shit like Wolfenstein 2 where you end up losing money on it because you're alienating a giant portion of your buyer base because of a innate bias that you've decided to have. That's just my 2 cents on the whole thing, but let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll catch you on the next one.